If you have seen any of my pages on Facebook, one being a page under my name, Robert Shipley, or Who is Your Provider, or Back to the Roots Ministries, then you may have seen me post a video entitled, well, it's actually the promotional video of my next book, which is entitled Undefiled Faith. And it's the promotional video that I put out back in, I believe it was maybe 2010, 2011. And it's the book right after Who is Your Provider? And it's the continued journey of walking in faith with God and all that He has done. I believe it was around that time, because in Who's Your Provider, I listed about the apartment that I was walking in faith for. Well, in Undefiled Faith, it's the continued journey of this faith walk that I have with God. So, under the promotional video, you may have seen me talk about the book itself, and that is basically the reason why I'm creating this video, is to speak even further about it, so that you have some more information about what you're looking forward to. So, the definition, one second. Okay, so the definition of undefiled faith in itself is faith that is not defiled by man's efforts, but trusting in God's words. The definition of defiled faith is man's efforts in the place of God's provision. And that is basically what you may see in the church. Somebody may state about they're walking in faith for something. But according to the laws of this world that the ideal man has set up, the faith walk in itself is going to be criticized by these people. And it's even professing Christians who claim that they love God. And it's the same people that say, well, you need to just trust God. But they really don't know what they're saying, because trusting God means you're going to be acting in a way that many in the church will not understand, because they have in mind the ways of this world, how the world functions, and how it functions according to financial success and the laws the ideal man has set for success. So anybody that is walking according to the ways of the world, they're not going to trust God. Instead, they're going to trust themselves in order to accomplish what it is that they want to accomplish according to the world. Now, in the promotional video itself, I had mentioned about two faiths that are in the book. The first is called safe faith, which the person is not willing to trust God. They won't step out in faith and leave it to God in His provision. Instead, they're going to think about how they can accomplish anything by their strength. Now, I speak of unsafe faith, which many in the world and many Christians who follow the ways of the world will heavily criticize. And people that are walking in unsafe faith will wholeheartedly trust God, but will receive backlash for doing it. And I'm basically calling it unsafe faith because many people that are following the world will say that it's irresponsible, it's risky, it's something that they wouldn't do and nobody else should do, because if you're walking in faith for God's provision, then that means that you're lazy, you're irresponsible, and any other thing that they're going to criticize you on. So like I said, undefiled faith is the continued journey of walking in faith. Now, examples of defiled faith, it could be many people of the world and even many believers who are worldly focused won't walk in faith. I mentioned that earlier. Instead, they depend on their jobs to get by. They want to save. so that they won't be in that place of need when the time comes. They think it's smart to trust themselves and do what the successful say. They walk in what I call safe faith, which is really no faith at all, because they're not walking in faith. They want to stay on the boat while they see Peter walk towards Jesus. Now, they criticize anyone who walks in unsafe faith because they're not walking in the pattern the successful has laid out. Christians trust in God for salvation, but that's it. That's as far as they're going to go. Now, it could be, number one, that they don't know anything about what God can do. Number two, maybe they heard what God can do, but they don't really want to go that far. So, being understanding in those situations will help. But for somebody that has heard about what God has done, that's a different story, because here they have examples of what God can do, but are they really, taking that step of faith, learning to trust Him? Now, anybody that is walking in safe faith, why trust God when they can do everything themselves? And so these are the same people that come up with the cliches, if you do your part, God will do His, which means that they do it all, or God helps those who help themselves. Instead of God, they trust their abilities, and, when God says that, He will provide, they will provide for themselves, so they won't have to depend on God. Now, anybody that's walking in unsafe faith, the world and financially focused believers call it irresponsible and crazy, because they are not walking in the pattern of the world. Instead, they are breaking the pre-molded mold that the ideal man has set for every man in this world to achieve success. So it's sort of like they're on an assembly line, everyone's becoming like everyone else, but then there's a defection. It's not working properly with some people, so they take them off the assembly line and they throw them away because they're not walking in the pattern that is laid out. In their eyes, it's not safe, it's unsafe when people are walking in faith for something. Now, good examples of people that have walked in unsafe faith, what the world calls unsafe, is Jesus walking on the water, and then Peter wanting to go out to him. He was the only one of the disciples that took that step of faith towards Jesus. Now, another example is Moses at the Dead Sea. He was there, all the Israelites were behind him, and God parted the waters. Moses had faith. The world will call him crazy because he's doing something that they cannot understand. Because no one has ever seen God break the physical laws of this world, and that is what God did. He intervened in that time of history and many other times. Just as, Joshua, when God halted time so Joshua can finish, doing what he had to do. Another example is Elijah at the brook. Now, he was waiting for God's promise of the birds to bring him meat, and I think it was bread, and he drank from the brook. He did something that this world will criticize. Why wait for food from a bird? Because that's crazy, number one. Number two, according to this world, it's financially focused people that will come against him and say, why are you waiting for the birds? Why not get a physical job and so that you can eat? Why trust God? Because it's crazy. Another example is Elijah with the prophets of Baal. He was walking in faith for God to answer by fire, and that is what God had done. Now, each example, the world will criticize the actions of each. Jesus walking on the water. Why are you walking on the water? Don't you know you have a boat here? Now, personally, my examples of walking in unsafe faith was for the apartment that I had. If you've seen my videos, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Months before I moved into the new apartment, God promised that he would provide a place. And he gave me little tidbits of information about it. Now, if you haven't bought my book, Who is Your Provider, at the end of it, in journaling, I had listed how I walked in faith for the apartment. So you will see that if you get the book. So months prior, God promised me that he would provide for the apartment, which, you know, amazingly he did. So if you haven't seen my past videos, check them out. I speak exactly on that. Another example was a car that my car broke down on the highway because of low gas. So the bill was like over $400. So I was walking in faith. There was nothing I can do, and God provided. And so you'll see examples in other videos of how God exactly did that. And it was nothing I could do on my own part. God did it all. I walked in faith for marriage. You know, I was journaling one day, and God said, as soon as I was finished journaling, that any day your wife will show. So a few days later, my wife wrote me, who wasn't my wife then, of course. It was a girl that wrote me on this dating site. And she said, "A man of God, how refreshing." So it was just amazing how God worked it out. That's where we started really talking with each other. One second. So just to continue to speak on it, God really revealed to me about her once her and I started talking. And he was revealing different stuff about her, in which she later saw those journal entries and was amazed that God gave me that detail about her. So, you know, he guided me the whole time, because if I would have walked according to my flesh, then I would have walked in hurt, and I would have just, you know, ruined the relationship. But she was the one God had intended for me. So that's another example. Further examples of walking in faith is God's provision on a daily basis. There were things that I asked God for that I couldn't do, and God provided, you know, eventually. So it's just being in that place to where we're depending on him solely and on no one else, and definitely not following the way the world does things and the pattern of the world. Now, this world sees examples, you know, even Christians follow the world and will criticize from the viewpoint of the world. You hear of examples of God's incredible provision, so why not walk out in that? It happened with Moses, Elijah, Elisha, Jesus. These examples are not just to be read. They are for us to take examples to grasp and to see what God can do, and to start our own faith walks. These are not just examples for us to read in Scripture and just bypass it and just tell people, yeah, God did this, God did that, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to continue following the way the world does things. No, it's to spark something in us that we would seek God for ourselves, and to know that he is all that we ever need. And so the reasons that are listed in Scripture is not just for God's provision. Number one, it's to be in awe of God. Number two, it's to trust him. Three, it's to increase our faith. Four, it's for us not to trust ourselves. Five, not to rely on the world. Six, it's to teach others. And seventh, it's to experience joy when we can see what God can do. So when you hear examples of what God does provision-wise, doesn't it spark anything in you to want to, you know, seek God for yourself and to trust him? Unfortunately, with so many Christians who are following, instead of Jesus, the financially focused, successful people who are the ideal man, they, unfortunately, they won't come to God in their faith walks until they come to the place of having to trust God for themselves. And, that happened with me. I was following the way the world does things. I was trying to follow what the ideal man said and trying to be successful, but I failed. So that's what led me into really depending on God and to trust Him. So in closing, just to let you all know that the self-entitled book, Undefiled Faith, will hopefully be in the book stands in 2020. So if you haven't seen the promotional video of Undefiled Faith, go to YouTube, type in Undefiled Faith, then Robert Shipley, then you should see another channel of mine. Go down until you see the promotional video. Then you can see what that's about. When I give the file to the publishing company, they will eventually make a promotional video, which will not be anything like that. It will be their own kind, and you could see exactly what they did with my Who Is Your Provider book. You could see the trailer itself on this channel. So if you haven't read Who Is Your Provider, that's available at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. It's available on eBay. So you can actually find it on there. You can most likely find it cheaper on eBay. So feel free to check it out there. I believe on Amazon you can read the first chapter, and possibly on Barnes & Noble as well. So if you haven't received Who Is Your Provider, if you haven't bought it, please check it out. It will definitely, hopefully, expose to you the worldly thinking. Not only that, but it will show you what God can do, and to show that the stinking thinking of this world really doesn't bring you any closer to God by following it. We need to be in that place of full trust and dependence on God, and this is what Who Is Your Provider will lead you to. It will hopefully start your journey to spark the faith that's inside you and to start your own faith walks. Undefiled faith is that continued journey. So I pray that not only have I given you information about what's some of the content in the book, but also have given you information that will help you in your own faith walk. So thank you for watching, and God bless you. And if you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe below, and then you could be aware of new videos that I post. Sometimes I premiere them live, but sometimes I post them. So check back periodically so you can see any new videos. Thanks for watching.